everybody hear properly? Is this good?
Good, yeah.
Good? In the back? No problem? Okay, I have one favor to ask.
No coughing.
No coffee, no, that's not the favor. The favor is if Robin or somebody who has a watch can give it to me so that I don't see any clock. And even though Daphne's not here, she's very strict, you know, that I don't talk too long. And if she were here, she'd be in the audience, go. And she's not, so I will do my best to keep this around an hour, maybe a little bit under an hour.
An hour or two.
Or under, so.
No wonder.
Can you put the mic closer to your face?
Yeah.
You won't strike
It
them.
won't bite you.
Okay, is that better? Okay. I'd asked if people could hear, no?
She didn't hear you.
Oh, she couldn't hear me. She couldn't hear me ask if people could hear. That's good, I like that. So for those who don't know me, there are some people here who are new to me. I don't know enough to give a talk, so I'm just going to read, I don't even call them poems because I'm not a poet. I call them prosems because they're more little story type things. And I'm going to tell some stories I've heard or read from the Mandalay about their life with Baba. And it's loosely connected, and we will not have questions during this. But afterwards, if people want to ask something, we can maybe deal with that. So without further ado, I note the time. For those who don't know, I'm from New Hampshire. So this is a New Hampshire prosem. If you live in the north, unless you have been very lucky, you probably have had to push a car out of the snow. If you have, you know that the most effective method, other than happening to have a dozen bodybuilding friends nearby who can lend a hand, or a neighbor with a heavy-duty truck and chain, is to rock the car. You push it forward a little bit, and then you let it roll back. And then you push it a little further forward, and let it roll back again, until you have built up enough momentum that you can finally push the car completely free of the rut it's in, and you can continue on your journey to your final destination. And this is what God does with your heart. He pushes it forward a little, and then he lets it slide back. And he pushes it forward a little, and then he lets it slide back. With each forward push, you're thrilled, and you exclaim, "Ah, I feel your touch. I'm moving. I'm free." And each time you roll back, you despair. "Why have you abandoned me? Now there's no hope. I'm worse off than when I started." What is impossible for us to know during this long, long process is how much momentum is being created, or when that final push will come. Now, Baba used to tell people this when he took people in the 50s up Seclusion Hill. He would take people up Seclusion Hill, and at some point he would stop and say, "This is really a metaphor for the spiritual journey." Because you all start off and you're real excited and you're full of enthusiasm, and the hill's not very big. I mean, it looks tiny. And then you start walking and you're with me and everything's exciting, and after a while you realize, this is taking longer than I thought. And it's hot in India. And this isn't as much fun as I thought. And so you get a little discouraged. And you're going on and you're getting more and more discouraged. And then, lo and behold, you hit the switchback. And the next thing you know, you're going right back in the direction you started from. You think, this doesn't make any sense. I'm going backwards. I'm not going to reach the goal. And so, of course, you hit that final switchback, and then you come back, and you can make it to the top. And Eric would tell us this when you take people, and he said, you know, Baba would say this, so I'm sort of honoring Baba by telling you the story, but of course, I'm old, and really the reason is I need to catch my breath, because it's too steep for me now. So his younger brother, Merwan, told us the same story, but added a little more of an inner dynamic. He said when Baba took us, and he was telling us the story, he said that what happens, the reason, other than it's hot and it's higher than you thought and it's taking longer, the reason you lose that enthusiasm is when you first start out, Baba acts like you're the greatest person in the world. that he loves you more than anybody else. And he loves everybody, but really speaking, everybody else he's tolerating, but you are special. And he makes you feel that. And so, I mean, what can be a better feeling than that? And you're walking along and you're with Baba, and after a while, he starts paying less and less attention to you. And then he becomes basically indifferent to you. And so you just, it's now a slog. It's not really that much fun. But you're with Baba. But then comes a point where Baba actually starts acting as if he finds your company irritating, annoying, that he can't stand your presence. And that is too much to take. And that's where the switchback occurs. Because you feel, if everything I do not only annoys Baba, but my very presence seems to make him uncomfortable, what's the point in being here? And so you go back, and you go back into the world. And that's the switchback. But when you go back to the world, what do you find? The world's not fun anymore. There's nothing to accomplish. You have no goals, you have no ambition, nothing means anything, and you don't have Baba. So you get so desperate that you start to feel like there's no point in living, and you decide to commit suicide. Now what Baba has said is this whole time, when you're going away from him, you're connected to him by a thread. And as you're going away, he's very gently letting it out so that the connection doesn't break. And when you reach the point you feel, I might as well kill myself. But Marilyn says, you realize I might as well kill myself, but if I'm going to kill myself, why don't I go back and at least die at my master's feet? And that's Baba, very gently pulling on the thread. And so you come back. And to your amazement, this time Baba's like, where have you been? I've missed you all this time. Well, I'm so happy you've come back. And then hand in hand, you do the final little summit. So this is Baba's game. Everyone's called it push-pull, Baba's push-pull game. Of Baba pushing people away, but not so hard that the connection breaks, and then slowly reeling them back in. And we see this, I mean, there's so many stories of Baba doing this, well, especially with the Mandali, of pushing them away. I mean, for instance, Rano went through a period where nothing she could do was right. And so she decided, I might as well leave. And she told Baba that. Baba, if nothing I do is ever pleasing you, I should just leave. And she said, Baba gave her such a disgusted look, like, what are you talking about? Are you an idiot? And she realized, well, no, it's not my choice to leave. If I've given my life to Baba, and it's his pleasure to be annoyed with me, well, then I have to accept that. You know, it's selfish for me to think, oh, well, if Baba's not happy, I have to leave. And Baba gave her that look, which somehow conveyed all of that in one disgusted look. But what was worse for her was the time came when Baba just didn't even ignore her, didn't see her, wasn't aware of her presence. If Baba came into a room and there were 8 people, and Baba was smiling at each person, he wouldn't even see Rano. It'd be different if he saw her and looked away, but it was clear that he never saw her when he looked around the room. And this went on for quite some time. And this drove Rano crazy. Until one day she was thinking about it. And she thought, for Baba, not just to ignore me, but to be able to not be aware of my existence so completely, must take so much concentration and effort on his part that he's thinking about me all the time. And as soon as she had that thought, Baba stopped that game and didn't do it anymore. But Adi K. Rani, some of you know, and Adi was Baba's secretary, and in the early days, not only was Adi close to Baba, but it was Baba's order that wherever I am, there were 3 people. It was Adi and Gunny and Gustaji? I don't know. The third one. And wherever Baba was, one had to sit on his left, one on his right, and one in front of him. And even if Baba went to the toilet, one had to sit on the left, and one... And in public, it was very difficult. And so that was Adi's job. That was one of the things he had to do. He had to be with Baba, that kind of intimacy. And in the later years, in the 60s, when Adi would go to Merazad, where Baba was, because Adi had so much business, and there was some telegrams and cables, and Adi was arranging this or that, he'd go to Merazad, And Baba was not happy to see him, and often Baba wouldn't even see him. And not only would Baba not see him, Baba would send some of the moms out, tell me when he's left. Is he gone yet? And of course Adi would find out that this was what Baba was saying, and Baba wouldn't come out till Adi had left. And this was just crushing, that my presence is so distasteful to you. And Adi would go back to his compound and just weep. And every now and then Baba would call him and console him, but it didn't change the process. And then Adi said, when Baba dropped the body, because he pushed me away that way, that was the only way that I could carry on with and do Baba's work. That's what enabled me to send out cables saying that Baba dropped the body. If Baba hadn't done that, I would have been hopeless. I would have been so crushed with grief. So Adi could then see or rationalize or understand, because I don't know why Baba did anything, that, okay, this served a point in Baba's work. I mean, for me, the fact that Baba left Kitty in Myrtle Beach to take care of Narina and then never called her back to India. Kitty experienced this as being pushed away from Baba. But to me, it's like, what a blessing Baba gave all of us, that Kitty was here, because she was just so wonderful. And I feel the same way about Mansari. Mansari was kept at a distance. She came, her only desire was to be with Baba. And so what did she get? Separation. And she was, after 40, whenever the Blue Bus tours ended, 42 or whatever, she was on the hill, and that was it. And seldom got to see Baba. But because of that, when Westerners came and said, oh, we miss Baba, she felt, I missed him too. And she went out of her way to make everybody feel, you haven't missed anything. And she also felt that the other women were somewhat exclusive. They had Baba, but she was excluded. So she was very strong on, I don't want anyone to feel that they've been pushed or kept away, or they're not as good as anyone else. So again, it seems to me, I have no reason to know why Baba did anything, but one obvious result is that we had somebody who was so accepting and loving to all of the crazy people that went there because she'd been pushed away. But there were other people, and it's not so clear why. I mean, I can't figure out any reason at all, like Krishna Nair. When Baba was doing massage, and Baba spent years and years and years doing must work. I mean, you read in Lord Maher that in this 2-week period, Baba traveled 3,000 miles over impossible roads, without sleep, without eating, contacting us. And this went on year after year after year. So Baba was in the south, and all of Baba's followers were from the north. So they didn't know Telugu, they didn't know Tamil, they didn't know the southern languages. So Baba hired some local boys to be translators. And I don't know, it was never said, but I'm just guessing that the common language was English. And they would speak English to the boys, and the boys would go out in Telugu, whatever, say to people, whatever you say. Is there a must nearby? People don't know you use the term must. Is there a holy person? Is there someone? And they would contact the must, and then Baba would contact them. And when this particular period of work was over, Baba called the boys and said, ask me for something. What do you want? So each one wanted something different. One wanted to be a Tongawala, so he wanted to have his own Tonga. And one wanted to be a businessman. And one wanted to be an agriculturalist. I think that's a farmer, but on a larger scale, I don't know. But one of them said, Baba, I just want you. And that was Krishna Nair. And Baba said, okay. And he then became one of the Mandali. And he stayed with Baba for decades, on and off. Because he was young, he did a lot of night watch duty. And because he did night watch, this was now in the 50s that he's with Baba. He's been with Baba for a long time. There are a lot of Krishna Nair stories, I'm not going to tell them. But he was with Baba for a long time. And Baba were usually where he stayed. The women stayed in a nice place, and the men were always put in some terrible place to stay. And the women had good food, and the men had nothing. And that's the way it was with Baba. Which is why, one of the reasons why Erich always had a little grudge about the women. He's, life with the men was so easy. We didn't require anything. If we traveled with Babas on third class, we slept on station platforms, we slept out in the woods. If we ate anything at all, it was whatever we could. But when the women came, we had to have reservations made months in advance. We had to carry all this luggage. But anyway, so Krishna Nair is staying with the men. But to do night watch, he has to go where the women are. So he's going back and forth between the two cottages. And in the middle is a girls' school. And I don't know the details of the story, but my guess is quickly word spreads, oh, some holy person has come. And they know, oh, this guy who's walking down the road is associated. So they start asking Krishna about Baba. And one of the girls says, can you get me a book about Baba? So Krishna goes back, and one of the men had a little booklet in Marathi, and he gives it to the girl. And then the girl's friends think, okay, this is a good opportunity for mischief. So they write a love letter to the girl in Marathi, as if it's come from Krishna. And I gather they didn't sign it, but it's just this letter, and the principal thinks it must be this Krishna fellow, because I've heard tales that these girls are talking to some strange man on the road. He's very upset. And somehow word gets to Baba, and Baba has to go to the school and talk to the principal. And Baba says to the principal, Krishna couldn't have done this. He doesn't know Marathi, so he couldn't have written a letter in Marathi. But because you're so upset, I will send him away. So he goes back, and he tells Krishna what happened. He says, you have to leave. And Krishna starts weeping. He says, but Baba, you're God. You know I'm completely innocent. And Baba said, yes, I know that. And when I am God, and I was God as Ram, and I knew that Sita was innocent. But for my work, I sent her away. And you've done nothing wrong, but for reasons of my own, I'm sending you away. And Krishna had to leave, and he was never part of the intimate mandali again. And this doesn't have, and now you know the rest of the story, we have no idea why. This was part of the pushing process. He did come for darshan programs. Baba would call him back. And he did come after Baba dropped the body and live at Mehrabad. But he was never called to stay with the mandali again. Which is why, when I think about it, it occurs to me that one reason people get confused when they look at Baba's life is they don't understand that how Baba treated his mandali is very different from how he treated everybody else. The mandali were Baba's body, which he never spared when it came to his work. He pushed them to the limit and beyond, whereas everyone else was treated with kid gloves. Which is why it seems to me to make sense to stay in the courtship phase, where Baba's trying to win you over, rather than enter the mandali phase, where Baba beats the shit out of you. Unfortunately, Baba's love is such that once he begins courting you, all you pine for is to be accepted as one of his close ones. Because just as there are many stories of Baba pushing people away, there's so many stories of Baba winning over the new ones, going out of his way to make them feel, whatever you've done, I accept you. People would come and feel, oh, I'm so weak, I've done this sin and that sin, and Baba would just welcome them with open arms. Nanak here, who many of you have met, his sister-in-law, Baba was coming to visit, and his sister-in-law made chutney. And Baba said, oh, this chutney is so good. This isn't like other people's chutney. I really like this chutney. And she was so happy. So a few years later, Baba comes to Nagpur, which is Nana's town, and the sister-in-law lived, I don't know, I'm going to say 30 miles away. I have no idea the distances. Anyway, she lived in a different town. And so she came for Baba's darshan in Nagpur. And Nanakir's mother has laid out a feast. And Baba says, oh, I feel full just looking at so many different dishes. So where's the chutney? And she said, oh, Baba, I don't remember the woman's name. Oh, Baba, she's having her period. So she's at home weeping because she can't come. Because it's a common Parsi, maybe Hindu, I don't know, thing, where if you're menstruating, you're in seclusion. You have a special metal chair you have to sit on, you can't sit on other chairs, you can't eat, you're just totally excluded. Baba said, call her. So she comes. And Baba says to her, who do you think I am? She says, Paramatma, God. And Baba says, you're right, I am Paramatma. But what does that mean? I am the infinite ocean. You can never be unclean to me. I can accept everything. He said, you never have to worry about, no one is unworthy. No one can be kept away from me. I welcome everybody. Now go home and make the chutney for me. And even the mandali were often pampered when they first came. But because they're mandali, Baba has his usual trick of doing two things at once. So he's pampering one mandali and making another mandali suffer because of it, you know, that kind of thing. So for instance, in the early years, for some reason, Baba wanted the mandali to write poetry. And there was someone from Iran there who apparently wrote terrible poetry. I mean, just the world's worst. And Baba said, oh, this is fantastic. And he named him Aga Baidul. And apparently there was a great poet with a Bidal or something. Someone can tell me. Similar, sort of, the great poet. And Jeff said that Baidul also means kind of like marble, big, thick, you know, dense. But anyway, sort of pun he's making. But he tells Baidul, oh, world's great poet. You know, continue. So Baidul thinks, wow, my poetry is that good and it's pleasing Baba. And after a while he comes up and says, Baba, I have a problem. Baba says, what's that? He says, sometimes my best ideas come when I'm in the toilet and I can't write it down. So Baba says, oh, you're right. Gunny tells Dr. Gunny, who really was a good poet, your job is to be with, anytime Baidul gets an idea, you write it down. So if he goes to the bathroom, you sit outside and write down any inspiration that Baidul gets. So that's the way Baba would play them off against each other. And when Harry Kenmore came in the 60s, late 60s, Baba, anything Harry Kenmore, I mean, he had special food. Erich was with him all the time because he was blind and Coco, and telling him Baba's stories. And all sorts of extra considerations were made for Harry. And Baba told Harry, and it's in the book if you read Harry, oh, you're one of my close ones. You're so special to me. You're one of my intimate mandali. I want you to come and live with me as one of my intimate mandali. And then when Harry went away, Harry says, Baba, do you know what you've done? And of course, Baba's always completely innocent. What? What have I done? You invited Harry? We can't have Harry come living here. I mean, he takes every minute of my time, Bob. For a 2-week vacation, maybe I can, but if he's coming to living here, oh my God, Baba, how can we cope? Baba says, don't worry. He'll die before then. But the joke was that Baba dropped his body before Harry. And Harry did come, but then decided not to stay there. But while Harry was there, late 60s means Baba's doing intense inner, universal work, seclusion work. And during those periods, you weren't allowed to make a sound. And because Baba was so sensitive, often the mandali wouldn't even walk. They would just stay on their beds, which were soft so that no noise, and just sit quietly for the entire time. Meanwhile, here he goes, sits on a bench outside the Baba's room and sings at the top of his lungs. And Harry was famous for being very loud anyway because he was mostly deaf. And he just belted out these songs. And the mandali were told not to say anything to Harry, to let it be. And this drove Rano, maybe drove all of them crazy, but Rano would talk about how mad she would get. Because she felt this isn't pleasing Baba. And Baba is doing this to please Harry, but it's inconveniencing Baba. So she was furious. And of course Marso, because she wasn't allowed to say anything. So she said that when Harry decided not to live with them, in a way she was very disappointed. I was looking so forward to Harry coming and Baba finally taking off the kid gloves and just smashing them. Except he never had that, he never got that experience. He only had the other experience. So I often think that if I have a choice, I don't want the mandali experience. I want the Darwin Shaw experience, where you have inner contact and you just know Baba is pure love, and you don't go through all the rest of that. But another example, which I think is kind of fun, of Baba pampering one and playing the mandala off against each other, is Erich's father, who you know was very strict. Merwan said growing up with his father was like being raised in a military camp. There was no affection. Papa loved his kids, but not the way we think of in terms of showing it. He didn't want any, he didn't like to show any kind of emotion, even for Baba. You're a man, you don't do that. It's all kept inside. And so fiery that Baba nicknamed him Pistol. Although I've also read that it was partly because his car looked like a pistol, so I don't know what the truth is, but it is true that he had a fiery temper. Very strict. Every time we can tell about that time where he's so strict, he's put in charge of, I'll make it very short, Gustaji's put under Papa's orders for a while, and Gustaji writes Baba, and he says, Baba, I was with Sai Baba. I was with Upasni Maharaj. I was with Babajan, and I've been with you. But I've never had to serve anyone as impossible as Papa. And if you don't relieve me from this, I'm leaving. But anyway, so Baba tells Papa they're at Bindra House in Pune. And Baba says, you're doing guard duty. I don't want to be disturbed. Don't let anyone to come into the house. So that's very black and white, which is how Papa lived. That was good. So who should come to Dr. Ghani? Dr. Ghani was one of Baba's, there's a term for it, the best way I can translate it is basically friends since we were all in diapers. Because they were, since young children, Ghani and Baba were friends. So this is now in the 50s. Ghani has been with Baba then, for, on and off, from Meerwan for so many years, and now with Baba for another 30 years. And Papa says, you can't see him. Can't go in. And so Ghani's taken it back. He said, but Baba called me. I'm here because Baba asked me to come. Nope, can't go in. And so they have a little confrontation. And apparently Baba's watching this from inside Bindra House and loving it. Finding this very amusing. So he claps and he calls them both in. He tells Papa, Papa, you're the only one I can trust. You're the only one who obeys me 100%. You won't let anyone in. And even if a king were to come, you won't let them in. This is the way to obey me. You're the only one I can trust. And Papa is so happy. And Ghani says to Baba, you can trust him, but you can't trust me? And Baba had the ability, he's the avatar, he has a lot of abilities, to be able to wink at someone and only the person being winked at would notice it. So Baba gives Ghani the wink, which is like, calm down, I'm humoring Papa. And Ghani was smart enough to know, okay, I know what's going on now, he doesn't say anything. So they did whatever work they have to do. And then Baba sends Papa out again and says, did a good job. And Papa said, but Baba, this is partially your fault. What do you mean? He said, I will keep people out, but you shouldn't ask people to come. So, you're right. Okay, I won't ask anyone else to come. So Papa goes out, and of course, who comes but another old-time follower, Dake Falkar, who had been hired to be one of the teachers in the 20s, 27, 28, whenever the school was. And he comes. But he's not as sophisticated as Ghani, so when Papa won't let him in, he starts just yelling at Papa. And there's a real shouting match that goes on. And Papa gets so disgusted, he goes in and he starts complaining about, what sort of followers do you have? This ignorant fellow, he should be shot out of a cannon. He doesn't know anything, goes on and on about how terrible Dake is. And Baba says, you're right. And he tells Meerwan, go tell him not to show his black face around here. And in India, that's a big insult. It seems weird, but India is very color conscious. And to say someone whose black face was a big insult. Tell him keep his black face away. So Papa's very happy. Baba's taken his side. So again, he's been supported. He's the only one who really knows how to obey Baba. And then Baba thinks of some error and he sends Papa off. And of course, as soon as Papa goes off, he calls Dake in. And they chat. And then he goes away. So Papa comes back, he's on duty. And who comes now but Gadakar, another old-time lover and his wife. But this time, Papa says, oh, Gadakar has come. He goes running to Baba, Baba, Gadakar and his wife has come. I said, what? I thought you wouldn't even let a king come see me. And you're telling me, Gadakar, oh, but Baba, he's higher than a king. He's an emperor. He tells everybody about you. He's brought so many people to your love. I said, oh, really? Oh, well, if you think that highly of him, okay, call him in. And so Gadakar's born. Anyway, I just like the way he's humoring Papa. And that's kind of where I want to be. I want to be humored. I don't want to be close enough. There's a nice thing in Donkin's diary where Bob, I don't remember the exact words, but basically Donkin is saying, dear diary, I'm so happy because today Baba blasted me and now I know I've been accepted as one of his close friends. I don't want to go there. I want to go more pamper, white lies, you're wonderful, I love everything about you. Let me see. It struck me that Baba not only, I mean, some of us, we may not feel we're being pampered. And we may not even feel that Baba is pulling it. He may not be pushing. We just aren't sure what's going on. And because Baba is very indulgent of people. And Baba does not force himself on anyone. And, well, I'll just read this. How can I complain about your neglect when it is so clear to me that I have been unfaithful? Rather than bemoan your absence, I should be glorifying you for even allowing me to approach. It is not that you spurn my advances or turn me away. It's in the middle of some ardent vow I'm making to you, pledging my life in your cause. A beautiful person walks down the street, and I turn my head and follow them. Even I am amazed at my lack of constancy. Were the situation reversed, I would have nothing to do with me. But you are not so petty. Your pride is not offended, as you are too certain of your own worth and too knowing of my weaknesses to take it to heart. You simply shrug your shoulders and say, when you're ready to get serious, so am I. And one of Baba's early followers was Dili Dilian's sister, Minta. And Baba wanted Minta to come to India, and she decided not to. And she would, over the years, write letters to Baba, usually complaining about how hard life was, or this or that, or one letter which was a complaint that Margaret once made about Baba, which is that we do all the suffering and he's got the bliss. You know, this whole game is so he can realize himself, but we take on the suffering and he takes on the bliss. And Baba did not find that humorous when Margaret said that. And Dili would say things like that. And at one point, Baba very bluntly said, well, you know, Minta, did I say Dili? Minta would say these things. And I said very bluntly to Minta, you left me, I didn't leave you. And in a letter he wrote after this long complaining letter, Baba writes back and basically says, well, you've chosen your path. And it's a longer path than I wanted, but it is a path. And I will be with you on it always. And I will guide you on it. And you always were mine, and you always will be. It's just not as fast a path as Baba wanted for. And in fact, in the highest of the high message you can read, and again I'm paraphrased, I have it written down somewhere, but typically I don't know where. Baba says words to the effect of basically, I can't expect you to understand now everything I want you to know. So it's my duty from time to time throughout the ages to come and plant the seed of love in your heart and to try to awaken you. But if you on your own decide to go in some other way, no one can stop you. And because that too is progress if you take that path. And eventually, after lifetimes of suffering, basically, you will come to know what I want you to know now. So Baba gives us that freedom to basically destroy our lives. Baba says the logic of experience will drive you to me. And unfortunately, he's willing to wait until that logic strikes us that, oh, this is kind of crazy. You know, if beating my head against the wall for 20 years hasn't worked, it's probably not going to work if I continue doing this. So Baba gives us that freedom because, I don't know, I think it's a silly plan. I have a lot of ideas for Baba when I see him. That's one of them. You know, Baba talks about this great game and so on. And I thought, okay, if this is a game, why don't we skip the beginning steps? And why don't we start where we all get a glimpse? Because if that's when we fall in love, give us all the glimpse and we'll take it from there. You know, we can still play the game. We're not perfect. We'll be vying with each other to outdo each other in Baba's love, as opposed to all the nonsense now, how we try to outdo each other. Lots of good ideas. Amazingly enough, Bob has never showed much interest in listening to my ideas. I don't. As I would say, better luck next life. Who knows? But I think anyway, for me anyway, not feeling those dramatic pushes and pulls, that sometimes I think others may too, we look for some sign. Are we really connected? I mean, maybe I'm following Baba, but has he chosen me, or have I just chosen him? Is there really that connection, or is this just my imagination? And so I think sometimes, I take it to extremes maybe, to try and convince myself that it's not just my imagination. Maybe the Lord isn't really trying to communicate with you by the subtle signs you've learned to recognize. Like that parking space right in front of the doctor's office. That help wanted ad that caught your eye when you picked up the discarded newspaper on the subway seat. It's certainly possible that this is all in your imagination. But then, or at least reliable sources have said this, all of creation is in the Lord's imagination. What's real when there are dreams within dreams within dreams? And there are certainly scary stories throughout history of people who were so sure that God was directing them what to do, that they did terrible things in his name. But I think there's a difference between being certain that you know what God is telling you and straining to hear his voice. No doubt, there's a lot of static at first. But the more you struggle to listen, the more fine-tuned your reception becomes. Prophets receive instructions. Saints carry on conversations. But for most of us, the secret is that God doesn't use words at all. He just breathes very gently upon our heart. So I was thinking that still for many people, especially when you look at the state of the world, you just wonder, what's going on? You know, what is Baba doing? The age-old question, I think, for most people is, if God is love, why is there so much suffering? Why is there evil? It's like the age-old question that people have. They can't reconcile it. Or if Baba was a loving God, why did he make Krishna Nair, who was completely innocent, leave? And one time I happened to be sitting with Merwan Jeswala, who at that point was the last of the Mandali. And because of that, when people came, they treated him with way more reverence than he could tolerate and was not happy with it. So what we did is we had a little stool put in front of him so that people, especially the Indians, couldn't bow down and touch his feet because they wanted to do that. And that's also just an Indian tradition. In the morning, in the old days, you're supposed to, in the morning, you touch your parents' feet when you come home from school, so on. So we did that so people could, and I was stationed next to marijuana. My job was to kind of catch the people when they're trying to circumvent this tool, to get around. So people are coming and they're talking, and this one woman comes and she says, Marijuana, I am so mad at Baba. And Marijuana says, why? And she says, because in 1968, I was going to go see Baba. And I wrote Baba and told him of my plan to see him. And I got a message back and said, don't come now. I'm giving darshan, what we would call spring, Indian summer, of 69, and come then. And she said, so I canceled my plans. And then Baba dropped the body. And so I missed my chance to see him. He says to Merwan, why did Baba do that to me? Why did Baba, I had my chance and I didn't get it. Why did he do that to me? And she was still very angry. And Merwan wasn't quite sure what to say, and tried to comfort her. And I was thinking, no, this woman doesn't realize what a gift Baba's given her. That here it is, 40 years later, she's come to Merazad. She hasn't left Baba, and she's thinking about Baba all the time because she's still angry at him. And so that and other experiences prompted this. How is it, Lord, I asked, that wherever I look, I see suffering and misery? All the earth seems enveloped in darkness. And while you may be the light of the world, so few in it seem to know you or have felt your healing touch. Not only that, but you appear to go out of your way to break the hearts of those who want to be with you, to serve you, and love you. You said, come. And you led me to a peak overlooking a vast and darkling plain with countless specks of light flickering beneath us like the sky on a moonless winter's night. Without your saying a word, I somehow knew that those lights were not stars, but individual souls wandering here and there. You see, I said, lost in the darkness, and no doubt frightened and confused. That's true, you agreed, but not without light to guide them. And I suppose you're going to tell me, I said a little skeptically, that that light is the love you've placed in their hearts. He laughed. You've been reading too much New Age poetry. Actually, that light is the pain and suffering that they've endured. It takes lifetimes and lifetimes before that light becomes strong enough to reveal a path to me. And I stared in silence for a while at the pinpricks of light moving down below, and noticed that what at first seemed like random motion now revealed an almost imperceptible movement forward. And then you drew my attention to a nearby hill where there was a small scattering of brighter lights whose progress seemed more purposefully direct. Those are the ones, you said, who will come to me before long, in some capacity or other. They are the ones who last time missed their opportunity, glimpsed me from afar, or are with me only briefly. And then you pointed to those nearest us, whose lights were brighter still. Those are my close ones. The ones I pushed away or turned my back on. The ones whose service I repaid with criticism. The ones I made promises to and then abandoned. Do you see how intense their grief and longing burn? When they take birth again, it is that which will lead them directly to my feet. That is their destiny now, and nothing in the universe can prevent it from being fulfilled. What you call my indifference, my neglect, my cruelty, is really me irresistibly calling them to me. You paused and concluded, in your experience, suffering is pain, but in my language, it's a divine promise that you will find solace in my embrace. And that's what I had planned, and I went through it a little fast, so I either left something out or was speaking at double speed. So I'm hoping, since I sort of had this more or less prepared, not as well as I should have, that if I come to the center in the fall, which Doc and I usually do, and Dennis asked me to speak, I'll probably do the same old thing. So I'm hoping you all promise to forget everything I say here. So you can come, and I'll have a few extra stories, so we'll do a whole hour, and oh, wow, that was wonderful. And you won't know that you've already heard it all. But since we are done a little early, if anyone has some questions or comments, or wants to... Yes, Bobby?
Lots of things. I heard 4 or 5 of your talks when you were here as artists and residents, and I didn't hear anything repeated.
I try not to.
So I'm sure you'll have great...
No, I don't plan to. I plan to do this one again. So that's what I'm telling you.
Oh, I see, okay.
That's what I'm warning
Well,
you.
maybe you'll change your mind. But I just want to ask, the woman that was mad at Barbara, it sounded like he was inviting her to go to the last darshan.
He did.
Did she, and she didn't go? Oh, okay.
She wanted to see Baba in physical body.
She would have.
She might have, who knows?
Was it a Westerner or an Easterner?
Indian
An
woman.
Indian.
Yeah. You know, actually, I did forget a section. That's why we finished early. I just remembered it now. I was thinking, you know, I was talking about this connection we have, how Baba, even after he dropped his body, found ways of reassuring people that they did have a connection with him. And I had a couple of stories about that. And one of them concerns our own Sheila Krinsky. And Sheila Krinsky found out about Baba in the 60s and was writing Baba, and Baba was writing back. And she was given work to do in terms of publishing little pamphlets and Baba's messages and so on. And she was so excited about the whole thing that she wrote, I've never seen it, some little book. I guess with like garish illustrations that she did. She's a little embarrassed about it now. And it's either her spiritual journey or the spiritual journey, I'm not sure what, and she sent it to Baba. And she got a letter from Adi K. Rani that your package has arrived. And then that was that, that's all she ever heard. And she went to the Darshan program in '69 and was completely bummed out by it because so many people there were feeling Baba's presence so strongly and she did not. And so I don't know if that Indian woman would have felt anything or not if she had gone. But what makes it even worse is, okay, maybe I'm not feeling much, but with everybody else way over the top going on and on about how much they felt and this and that, it made it even harder to tolerate, which is a small digression here. Reminds me that Irene Coneybear, who wrote Civilization and Chaos and some other books whose titles I don't remember now, had come to see Baba. And Baba gave her interviews and answered questions, and she's the one who asked about UFOs. And Baba said, you know, I wouldn't answer this for anyone else, but for you, I'll tell you this much. They're not from other planets. And she wrote all this stuff. She was interested in all sorts of occult and esoteric things. So anyway, Baba's sending her home to go back, I think to America, to do his work in America, and on the same ship with Narina. And speaking of being over the top, Narina was very over the top and effusive and flowery. And Narina would say to Irene, who was very British, which meant she didn't show much emotion, oh, wasn't it something being in Baba's presence? Didn't you feel this divine emanation? And didn't you feel that? And weren't you transported to this realm? And Irene Coneybear hadn't felt any of that. And she finally wrote Baba a letter and said to Baba, please, can't you give me an experience? And what I thought was funny is she wanted an experience just so she could keep up her end of the conversation with Narina. Because Narina was driving her crazy. You know, don't you feel this and don't you feel that? And which really shows Baba's sense of humor is he gave her one. So that when she got on the boat, she had an experience, and then she could, you know, at the dinner table, she and Narina probably could have a good talk. But where were we? That was a digression.
Sheila.
Sheila. So Sheila hadn't had that experience and felt really bummed out. And she said she was, I think, doing discourse meetings at the time, or doing tape meetings with Kitty and, you know, setting things up. Excuse me. Sorry. And one time, well, we know Kitty was very intuitive, but it seems like you didn't have to be intuitive to realize that Sheila was not in a good mood. And so Kitty just said, you know, Sheila, you can leave Baba. My brother did. And somehow being given that permission just changed everything for Sheila. And now that she knew, it was her choice. And when she thought about that, she was, I want to stay. You know, I don't want to leave. And it just changed her emotional set very much. But anyway, that's also a digression, but years pass. And now, I'm going to say 2010. So this is what, over 40 years from her having sent her little booklet to Baba. And all she'd ever heard from Baba was nothing from Baba at all, but from Adi, saying, you know, the package arrived. So I happened to be involved in editing Bal Natu's book, Intimate Times with Meher Baba. And as part of that book, they're Balnatu's diaries that he kept. Every year he kept a diary, and almost all of them been lost. But 67 was not lost. And so part of the book is his 67 diary. So I'm reading this because we're editing this book, and there's a little thing about, today Sheila's book was read out to Baba, something like that, and she had never known. And so we
Wow.
talked, Sheila, did you know this? She said, no, I'd only heard from Adi that the book had been, received. I didn't even know Baba had actually seen it. So you can imagine that would make you feel very, very good that Baba did really know what you had done. And Bill and Peggy Stevens, this is not a story I heard from them, felt a little bit left out because being older people, most of their contemporaries had met Baba in the 50s, and they had not. And they felt, well, geez, everyone else has met Baba and we haven't, and it hurt a little bit. That again, do we have that connection? Why weren't we called? Why didn't we see Baba? And so that went on for a long time. And your Laurel McGreeny used to work at Merazad a lot. And one day she's there at Merazad puttering about whatever the women did. I tried to stay away from the women's side. But she's puttering about in Baba's house, and she sees an old copy of Reader's Digest. So Laurel, being a reader, picks it up and she's looking through it, and there's an article by Bill and Peggy Stevens about pearls. And as a sidelight, I just heard the other day from someone who knew them that Bill had written the article originally, and apparently it's fairly scientific. And he'd been asked by Reader's Digest to write this article, and he sends it in and they reject it. And he works on some more and they reject it again, because apparently it was just too scientific. So Peggy says, let me have a crack at that. So she edits it. So now it's in both their names, and now it's more mainstream, and the Reader's Digest says, this is good, and they print it. So Laurel's like, Money, did you know this? This is our Bill and Peggy Stevens, they wrote this article. And I said, what? Let me see that. And he goes, whoa, I didn't know that, but I remember that article because we read it out to Baba. Because Mary liked it, because there's something in here about a pearl the shape or size of a potato. And that really seemed interesting, so we read this article out to Baba. And so the next day, as it turns out, you can get Laurel to tell the story. She does a better job than I do. But I think the next day, it was the birthday of one of them. So the birthday present money presents them the copy of the Reader's Digest. And they had now known that while Bob was alive, they'd had that contact. Those were, years later, Bob saying, yes, I know of you. You were here in Merazad with me. But I think the best of those stories, at least the one that really touches me, is one that maybe some of you know, but I don't care, I'm telling it anyway. That Bernard Bruford, an Australian, was a teenager when he went to the East-West Gathering. And he said he was there, and on one day they bring out the 4 journeys. You've seen that chart and the everything and the nothing, and first journey and second journey. And I think Francis is explaining this, or maybe Don. Some Westerner is reading out an explanation of the 4 journeys. And Bernard feels like, whoa, this is way over my head. I don't understand any of this. And so he decided, I'm not going to understand anything. What do I know about spirituality? So he gave up trying to listen to any of this. And there were messages that were read out. So I didn't listen to any of that. And the Indian music isn't, if you're Westerner, a lot of it is not your cup of tea. So anyway, he said what I did, what I found fascinating, is I would watch the people taking darshan. And endless queues. And people would come, and Baba's sitting there, and they bow to Baba. And Baba's looking at them. And then they come up, and sometimes Baba would stroke their chin, pat them on the head, do something, and then they would move on. And he said that what was amazing is that when they bowed down, very gracefully, very casually, Baba would turn and start having a conversation with someone. And just didn't seem forced, and Baba would have a conversation, and as the person started to raise their head, again, very gracefully, right on time Baba was there. And they look up, and Baba's looking at them. And he couldn't believe that Baba could do this so perfectly. And nothing seemed rushed. It wasn't, oh, someone's looking. It was just, this amazing dance. And he said, but then I would do this for hours. And I saw that every now and then, Baba missed. And he didn't turn back again in enough time. He said, but then I noticed that when this happened, it's because the person didn't look up at Baba. They took darshan and then turned and walked away. So Baba's still batting 1,000. And he finds this amazing. Until at some point in the darshan program, a Western woman comes, and Baba's looking at her, and she bows down, and Baba turns, and he's talking to someone, and she looks up, and Baba's not there for her. And she moves on. Later, Bernard meets this person. And Avi's commented out, they were both at the East-West gathering. And she says, you know, I've had this pain in my heart, I'm paraphrasing, I've had this pain in my heart ever since, because I noticed Baba would do something endearing, some intimate touch with each person. And it was my turn, after taking Baba's darshan, he didn't even look at me. And Bernard didn't know what to say, other than, you're right, I saw it. I remembered it, it was significant. So he couldn't say anything. So it's always hurt me to this day. More years pass. She's in India. Baba's long since dropped his body. She's gone to India, and I think she's at the Pilgrim Center. I think this was before the Pilgrim Retreat. And an Indian man comes up to her and says, excuse me, were you at the East-West gathering? And she said, yes. He said, oh, I thought I recognized you. She said, well, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. He said, no, there's no reason why you would know me, but I remember you. And she said, why? He said, I was on stage with Baba, and I remember you, because as you came and you bowed, Baba turned to me and said, I love her so much.
Oh my God.
And she heard this then for decades. So that was part of the pushing away to build up the love. Reeling you back in. Hey, I think we can, a few minutes?
Yeah,
We haven't quite gone the
There's
hour.
nowhere else to go. It's the only place open, you know? Go for it.
Okay, two little things, and then I'll have to quit, or my wife will kill me.
We won't tell her.
She'll know. She'll know.
We won't tell her.
We won't
When
tell.
in '54, when Bob was giving darshan in Wadia Park, Darwin Shaw was there, and he just felt this love. You know, Darwin was psychic, so he not only felt it, but he saw and experienced waves of love going out from Bob. And even the Mandali would feel this, which is why they were so disgruntled with the fact that this Baba only did this for darshan programs and not for them. So they let, might say it's like Baba, some people say it's like Baba dropped veils, others, so Baba opened the spigot and the love just flowed. So Darwin was just amazed and he thought, I wonder if there's an end to this. So Darwin leaves the stage and walks back. And he's walking back to the back of the crowd and he's still feeling it. And he gets all the way behind the 50,000 people, whatever it was, and he can still feel it way in the back. There's no diminution at all of the love flowing from Bob. So Darwin goes home after 3 incredible weeks. And Jean, his wife, who didn't come, said, Darwin, what happened on such and such a day? And they start comparing notes. And Darwin said, oh, Baba gave darshan in Wadia Park that day. And Jean said, you know, because suddenly I felt waves of love coming. So I reached Schenectady. And knowing Bob, it probably didn't stop there, but just... So anyway, Daphne will know. She said, what happened? At 4:20, you were still talking, weren't you?
Rascal.
So there are undoubtedly good people in the world. There are those whose behavior we admire and whose philosophy we approve of. But your heart is not necessarily uplifted the moment you come into their presence. And although it's easy to get caught up in the excitement surrounding charismatic individuals, that's more a titillation of the mind than a conquest of the heart, because there's seldom a correlation between a charisma and moral values. But should you meet a friend of God, you will know the difference. Their very being silently emanates a perfume which intoxicates the heart. Like sailors, who even in the middle of the desert carry with them the scent of ocean. So that's how I felt about the Mandali, that just sitting with them is like that. Okay, Ducky, last one.
200 more.
When you're in a difficult situation, try to imagine Baba being there with you. Not so that he can use his divine powers to miraculously save the day, but so his childlike delight in life, coupled with his irrepressible sense of humor, can turn it into a fun-filled romp. There's no denying at times with his close ones, Baba can make a small matter into a major concern. But we don't need his help to do that. That's basically one of the few skills we've mastered. After lifetimes spent taking ourselves way too seriously. Think instead of the way Baba could tease someone about something in such a way that not only were all the bystanders amused, but the person being teased felt embraced in loving intimacy. Think of your life as a skit for Baba. Of course, you'll try to play your part perfectly. But what Baba always enjoyed the most were the mistakes. The times the false mustache started to come loose and was hanging lopsided down your chin. Or when you forgot your lines and he had to remind you to look at your cheat sheet. Or when you became so flustered, you served tea to him instead of the other actor in the skit. Sure, it's painful to face public humiliation, and no one can pretend that physical suffering is fun. But if we can turn to Baba as we're sitting there in the mud puddle of our life's catastrophe and say, well, this is another fine mess you've gotten us into, not only will that make Baba smile, but his response will lift your spirits as well. Thank you very much.